Hey guys, good to see you again. Welcome back to the channel. This channel is dedicated to helping you become a better photographer or cinematographer. Today we're going to be talking about light. So when it comes to light, there are lots of different terms that are used, and there are lots of different measurements and metrics for measuring light. And some of those measurements and metrics cross over from different industries. So you may be familiar with such terms as LUX, Lumens, candela, foot candle, watts per second, guide number. There are some of the key terms that are used. Now, guide number and watts tends to be a metric that's used specifically for flash, and lux and lumens tends to be a measurement for continuous light, such as LEDs and the sun as a potential. So when we're talking about lumens and lux, that is a metric measurement. When we are talking about candela and foot candles, we are talking about imperial. Okay, so lumens and candela are the same thing. Okay, they're just different measurements, imperial versus metric. That is a measurement of the total quantity of light emitted by a light source. So when we start to talk about lux and foot candles, that is the amount of light that falls on a subject. The light that you start to see on me, that is the lux measurement. From the actual bulb itself or from the COB chip, that will be a lumen. Now, when we're talking about photo and video, we don't tend to use lumens. That tends to be a term that's used in the industrial architectural industry, where you're trying to make measurements for how many fluorescent tubes you need in a building to light it. When we're talking about lighting for photo and cinema, it doesn't really matter how much light comes from the light source, because we're not filming the light source, we're filming the subject. So the important thing for us is the measurement of lux or foot candles. How much light is falling on the subject that we are going to record. And that subject can be anything. It can be a human, it can be something, an inanimate object. It's the amount of light falling on it. Now, there is a mathematical equation to be able to work out the difference from the imperial and the metric system. And that is 10.7 lux equals 1 foot. So if you're going to do the maths, you would do lux divided by 10.7. To make it easier, just divide it by 10. And that's how you would measure the lux from a light source. So if you open up a box of a piece of equipment and you see that there is a measurement for foot candles as opposed to lux, you now have the mathematical equation to be able to get that correct. So when we're talking about lux, lux is the amount of light falling onto the subject. Within that, there are also some additional measurements to have, because light going onto a subject is great, but if it has magenta or green shifts, the colors are going to be all wrong. So then we open up a conversation around CRI, TCLI, TLCI and TM30. These are metrics for measuring the accuracy of color from a specific light. Now, the higher we get them, the more accurate they will be. Therefore, if we have a CRI of 98, we know the light that's falling onto a subject doesn't change or interact with the subject themselves, creating a different color. It is very natural. So we try to look for lights with as high CRI and TCLI as possible to ensure accuracy. And that's something that you will get as you buy more premium products. It's a super important measurement to have, because yes, light is great, but if it's the wrong color, you're then going to have to do more work in post-production. So for instance, if you were shooting inside a commercial building and the CRI was, around 80, the color cast you would get on your subject means post-production has to be improved. So as photographers and cinematographers, we want to make sure we are using lights or equipment that have very high CRI or TLCI. Now, CRI was kind of the first metric that came around. That got to the point where it wasn't good enough, because we need to read more available variance in color within that spectrum. So then we move to TLCI, which is a broader measurement of light, and it gives us a more accurate result. So they are how we measure the quality of light. So the two metrics, the way they have a relationship is lux is the amount of light that falls on the subject, and the CRI, TCRI is the quality of the light that falls within that space. So they're very important metrics to understand. Now, where the conversation gets slightly confusing is we then have conversations around watts per second. So you may come across a strobe that is 500 watts and you're thinking, what does 500 watts equate to? That is the burn of energy. So 500 watts are burnt in a single second to produce that light. Now that's of course going to create a powerful light. But within that powerful light, that doesn't define it doesn't define how much of it falls on a subject. Because if you are using a strobe with no light modifier, that light scatters off in all different directions and you'll have inaccuracies within that. So you have to get to the point of shaping it. So watts per second is a measurement of how much energy is burnt per second to create that. It's fair to say the higher watts there are available, the brighter that light will be. And that's kind of a measurement that's used. And that measurement particularly starts to then have a conversation around guide number. So a guide number is the distance a light can throw light to expose a subject optimally from base. So the higher the guide number, the further that light can be thrown. Now, that conversation around guide number has no impact when we are talking about quality. So CRI, TLCI, so on and so forth. So for photographers who traditionally use flash, they will tend to talk about watts per second and guide numbers. And that's their reference point for measuring light. Whereas cinematographers and the newer age photographers will have conversations around LUX, because that again is a measurement of the total light falling on a subject and then the accuracy within that, the color spaces, so CRI, TCOI. So the conversation can be quite confusing, and that's understandable, but hopefully, those breakdowns of all of those metrics will give you a better understanding of how light is measured. So then you can look at a situation and say, okay, cool, I know that is 90,000 lux. That gives me an idea of how much light's going to fall on that space, and the CRI is 98. Therefore, I know the color accuracy is going to be great. If you are a stills photographer and you're using strobe, for instance, a higher guide number and a higher wattage means you're going to create a bigger burst of light. So for instance, if you were trying to use functionalities like high-speed sync and you were going out competing against the sun, that's a very challenging scenario and you need a lot of light to be able to do it. So a 250 watt system may not be adequate enough. Whereas a 500 to 1000 watt system, then you can start competing and being able to sort of, you can't compete with the sun ever. It's the most powerful light source known to man. But you can, in certain situations, use the flash to work with the sun to create these really dynamic looking images. So yeah, hopefully that answered some of your questions. My golden rule with light is, as photographers and cinematographers, the only metric we should really be caring about is LUX, and that's kind of the modern metrics. If you find something in foot candles, of course, you know how to do the calculation now, but LUX is the main thing we are looking for. So sometimes you will see information based on lumens, and the reason manufacturers will do that is because you're going to have higher level of lumens at a light source than you will have LUX, and that's because it's brighter at source than it is on surface. So some manufacturers will try to deceive you in terms of giving lumen readings because it sounds a bigger number. It's more exciting, you're getting more value for money with a bigger number. Whereas with the LUX, it may be slightly smaller because the light gets weaker as it travels forward. And that's a thing called the inverse square law, which is another conversation for another time. So on that note, I'm going to end. Thank you ever so much for watching. Please do ask me any questions down below. I'm always happy to help. Until next time, guys, I will see you later. Take care.